bedroom. Okay. There's people against the wall. They're, I'm on one side, and this is the first time that I'm actually talking to these people. And I started about an EVP, and the next thing I know, when I look up, I bet there's 25 phones taking pictures and flashing and stuff, and the K2 is going off, and the millimeter behind me is like melting on the wall, and I'm like, good God, people. And so, and you have that many people taking that many pictures all at one time. I mean, I almost had to go sit down because of all the sunspots. And so, so do you tell people when you're doing these events, are y'all getting ready to do Slaughterhouse, or did y'all do Slaughterhouse?
Doug McCarnahan, he's putting that one on. We're appearing at with him. That's in Tucson, the 23rd of February, I believe.
Right.
We've never investigated it ourselves yet. I know we've seen the episode of Ghost Adventures, and I know we've had a couple other investigators here in Arizona that's investigated it. And we try not to hear other people's experiences. It's just something we try not to. I think when you hear all about all that kind of stuff, I think it's in your mind, and you're, going in there. So I try to go in there with a clear mind, to be honest with you.
And that's the positive thing of having a case organizer too, is because I can really limit what the knowledge I have on an investigation before going into it. When prior to us having a case organizer, it was all me. So me going into a location, I found myself being more paranoid and more waiting for these things to happen. When we had much more positive results and much more real evidence gained by going in there and not knowing all the information, because sometimes I think having all that information definitely alters the direction of the investigation. When if you just kind of go in there blindly, I think that sometimes you have a better shot of catching quality.
Totally different with a residential home. I mean, Jay and I totally do it differently with residentials. We actually meet with the family. We do a lot more other research, and our case manager goes in depth completely before we even call the families anymore. I will honestly say, because people don't realize what damage you can do by going and even talking to some of these families. They are saying that they have paranormal experience. You can really ruin someone's life. So Jay and I take it really serious. We do
very few residentials these days with doing so much television, because the unfortunate repercussion of us doing the television is that you get a lot of people reaching out to you that are saying, hey, would you come to my house and have it featured on maybe Haunted Case Files or another show? And it kind of ruins the quality of the investigation. So oftentimes these places don't even know if Marie and I will be the ones showing up. It might just be our teammates showing up and not us. So that way they're not expecting, some kind of production type quality investigation that's going to land them, in some book or something, you know what I mean? So, our purpose for going out there and helping families especially is to bring back peace of mind and to especially help children that struggled like I once did.
Well, a lot of people don't realize when you're actually dealing with a family, if you actually get through all the steps of finding out, medical, health, all that kind of stuff, what's going on there, and then we're able to go and talk to them. Sometimes just talking to them is all. Some of these homes don't need anybody going in there and messing with equipment and going in there, stirring up anything. All they need is counseling. Help them to be able to learn how to live with what's in their home. Sometimes people think it's bad, but like we always say, most of the spirit world is good. It's just people see it on TV, so they think it's bad. So, it's more or less counseling a lot of these families now. So a lot of times it's not us even going to their home and investigating unless it's a really, bad case and maybe we have to. But a lot of times it's just counseling and talking to them.
Well, when you sit down with a client and you put it in perspective and they tell you, they're terrified because they're hearing footsteps and they're hearing a person's voice and these things they're telling you, or they hear door slams or whatnot. When you really break it down to them and you say, okay, so you heard footsteps. Now think about that. Can a footstep hurt you? and you really start, putting it into perspective, because your mind plays hell with you when you're in these situations, when you're being haunted, and your mind just goes everywhere, and you're like terrified and you're jumpy with everything. But when you really put it in perspective and you break it down for them, oftentimes after that brief conversation, they're like, oh, you know what? You're right. And oftentimes we encourage families. You always see the same thing, or we do at least, with residential cases. 8 times out of 10, there's domestic violence happening in the home, or there's, there's different kinds of, whether drug addiction, suicide. There's things going on inside the home.
Mental illness.
And these things are all, we call these homes that we visit, we call them temples. And within that temple, we explain to them that you have multiple windows, and you've allowed multiple windows to be opened, like to sin, or to, allow yourself to be vulnerable to the other side, and the more negative side of the other side, if you will. And we explain to them how to shut those windows. And that's really like eliminating some of the screaming and the yelling and the fighting in the home can dramatically decrease a haunting. We've seen people that started taking arguments outside the house, and like activity has completely stopped inside their home, because they're feeding these hauntings with this emotional energy, which is making it unbearable for them. But if they would just take it outside the house, then they wouldn't have this.
A lot of people don't realize a lot of these residential home calls they're getting. These people have teenagers. You do not. I've raised three. I've raised 3 teenage boys. Boy, there's a lot of energy that come off these boys. I can't even imagine a girl. I mean, it's a lot of energy. And sometimes when you're feeding with that energy, and then you're actually opening other things like arguments, breakups and sadness and all that, you could bring other stuff in there. So, I mean, that's where the counseling comes. And one thing I will say, Jay and I will never go into a home and tell them their house is not haunted. We're not that kind. I will honestly say there's a lot of homes I will actually tell Jay, I doubt that house is not haunted. It's just stuff that, it's their house creaking and everything. But we try to talk to them about that stuff. So it ain't like, I'm coming out to them, because they honestly believe their house is haunted. I'm not going to call them a liar.
Right.
So we teach them how things are causing you to think that way. And there's a lot of people, and we tell them that they're not the only ones that, because your house is settling, that you hear other noises and stuff. And then when you start actually having that fear in your home, well, you can't open something up in your home then after that fear enters in your home. So, that's one thing about us. Big on counseling with other families.
We see a lot of the residential cases, it turns out to be more like self-generated hauntings is what we call them, is that they've been self-generated by, I guess religious people would call it sin, or negative thinking or negative energy and stuff like that. So they've essentially created their own poltergeist within their own homes, but it's essentially their energy just bouncing around the house. It's a direct reflection of their own inner demons that they're facing. It's not a demon itself. It's your own inner issues that you need to work out. And we direct people to different spiritual counselors for that, or religious clergy. I'm a social worker by day, essentially, so I have a lot of different services that I could, provide them as far as directions that they can go.
So, if it's us getting a case, and we might think, oh my goodness, this is going to be one heck of a case. And us paranormal investigators, we all have to admit it. It gets exciting sometimes, like, oh my goodness, it's been like 6 months before we got a good case, and you get all these things. I'm like, oh my goodness, we're going to actually see something be lifted up and thrown. Yay. That's how weird we are. We want to see things lifted up. We want to be grabbed, all this stuff. That's one thing about us. But, you hear about it then, but if you sit back and think about it, this is someone's home. So we want to sit there and take it back before we even think about, taking our energy in there and trying to push anything further. So I always tell people, as a paranormal investigator and been doing it as long, I'm not an expert. Oh my goodness, I learn stuff on a daily basis. I learn stuff even when we're doing ghost hunts with brand new people that's never even investigated. I can learn something from them. So I'm just saying, when you're out there, a new team out there investigating, and you're taking residential cases, please step back and really think about what you're doing to these families first, because it really can harm families. And that's one thing we'll say with Jay doing TV, with us doing TV now. I've actually got to reach out and help a lot more families now, and that's the reason at first I'm like, okay, I don't want to do TV. And I'm like, I remember Jay's like, just come on. It's going to be fun. It's going to be exciting, something new. And I'm like, oh, I don't know if I really want to do it. No. But after all the families that reached out to me about their autistic children and how many have contacted me and told me that I helped them, it makes me feel blessed.
Because we believe we did and that's in reference to a episode we did with Ghost Adventures Aftershocks, where Zach had assigned a doctor and a parapsychologist to kind of help us work through some of the stuff that we were having going on in our own home, and at the same time we were finding connections as paranormal investigators with mental illness and the paranormal and children in the paranormal in general. And the conclusion that we had come up with is that children are fresh from heaven. They're fresh from their creator, if you will, and they haven't been filled with life's disappointments and tragedies and failures, really. Right? I mean, life it can be very tragic and it can be very overwhelming. And in time, we lose that childlike faith. But I believe we're all born with special gifts and abilities, and that no one's no different than the other. It's just that some of them harness that gift given at birth through their adolescence and up through their adult life, as others suppressed it. The same as when you see, Aunt Susie talking to her dead husband Bobby in the corner, and she swears to God she's talking to him, and he's been passed away for 20 years. It may not be that she's crazy. It may be that veil for her is thinning, and as she's crossing over, she's being reunited with that child-like ability to be able to see through that veil much more clearly. And with that show and the help of the parapsychologists and the doctors that came in, we were really able to kind of harness that, and it helped us to go on to actually help a lot of families.
Zach actually went out of his way and actually helped my family. To be honest with you, I hear a lot of negative things about Zach and everything, and I'm not the type that goes and sticks, puts my word into anything, but I will say Zach really does care about people. He went out of his way for my son. Until this day, he follows up on my son constantly. So he really does have a good heart, and he really does. The whole paranormal thing is really something that's inside of him, and he really just wants answers himself.
So you guys being in the paranormal field, how did it come about that you were able to transition over into television?
It was sort of by accident. I don't know, it was like 6 years, something. I don't know how long it's been now.
I think it's five
or 6 years, maybe. I don't know. We had a production company call us, and they were interested in us providing them with some type of ghost story. And we gave it to them. Just like, okay, whatever. That's weird. They'll never call us back, and they did. And then we went out and filmed, had a terrible experience, and we were like, we're never doing this again. Let's just go back to the cases, get away from all this. And then I'd say probably a good 6 or 7 months later, I was working for the sheriff's office at the time, and I had worked nights. I was about ready to go to sleep, and I get a voicemail. Someone had called, I missed the call, and it was Jeff Belanger of Ghost Adventures, and he had left a message saying, Zach Bagans had just recently reviewed your video in Apache Junction of a brothel that you and your wife investigated, and he was very impressed, and we'd like to talk with you about being a part of the show. And I was like, this is bullcrap. Like, there's no way. Like, whatever. So I ended up calling the guy back, and sure enough, he did, and we filmed that particular show, and we were kind of like, wow, like this, we met Zach, and it was kind of like we were kind of starstruck at first, like, wow, this is weird, that we're here doing this, and it was kind of cool. And then from that, Zach followed up with us and his production crew, which led us to Ghost Adventure Aftershocks, which was a follow-up about what we've gone through after, being ghost hunters and stuff we had with our family. And that's when he kind of helped us out from there. But then after that, it was one show after another show and another show. And I don't know how many shows.
Haunted Case Files is our big one that we really have. The production company and group, it's like a big family now with Haunted Case Files. Yeah. A lot of us have been on season 1 or in season 2. There are some new ones in season 2 this time, but there's a lot of us that, more or less family that's been season 1, season 2. The production company is.
The production company is great. With, Haunted Case Files. But when they reached out to us for that particular show, we had already been on multiple shows before that, a show called Unprotected. We've been on Paranormal Witness, just a myriad